Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the show that puts you, the listener, in the driver's seat because you are the content. The phone lines are open to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Hey, give me a call. We'll have a conversation about your tech questions or business tech questions. Linux advocate, above all else, small business owner, now host of the only radio show centered around you, the listener. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. My name is Noah Chalai. So good evening to you all. Delighted to be here. Another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicking off this hour. And tonight we've got an exciting night. I spent the week trying to figure out what exactly we were going to talk about, as a solid topic. And obviously we are going to get to the Intel vulnerabilities and an update with that. But really, I think what we really came to after a couple of days is that we just have a lot of housekeeping stuff, things to catch up on, things that we haven't given like an entire episode to, and today deserves that. So that's what we're going to do. And of course, your phone calls come first, 1-855-450-6624, the email live@asknoahshow.com. This hour, we're going to start out with James in Idaho. Hey, James, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah.
Hey, James, how can I help?
Oh, I have a newer motherboard, which is onboard audio, and when it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, you imagine the worst-case scenario. I need some recommendations for audio I hook up to it to get basic audio out, which, because all over the net, everything, A through Z is recommended, and audio.
Okay, can I get what's the make and model of the motherboard? Let's start with that.
Well, it's a Asus make, and let me dig up the damn box. It's one of their newer gaming systems. They call it in big print, they just call it the Z7170 Pro.
Oh, okay.
With 5-way optical, it's a newer. It was for the 7th generation, and like I said, when it works, it's a gaming board. When it works for audio-wise, it works great. When it doesn't work, you hear nothing but hiss. Or, my favorite, there's no left channel at all, and then back in, and then crystal clear, and then to garbage.
Let me ask you something. Is there a reason you want to use onboard audio? Any particular reason you don't want to use like an outboard USB DAC?
What I want to do is. I'm coming to the conclusion to go off-board audio, but I don't want to invest because I'm not having like you have real high-end stuff. I don't want to invest too much, but I don't want to get stuck with total garbage that you can find on Amazon, all over the place. We're like, yeah. And you do a little bit of audio, and you might have some recommendations to where to get reasonable but not break the bank audio hookups external. Because onboard is, as you figured, it's all over the place. It either works great or terrible.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess so. Let's start with this. One of the reasons I don't like built-in audio interfaces, James, for a couple of reasons. One is they tend to pick up a lot of noise, and even when they don't pick up a lot of noise, the quality just isn't really that great. Excuse me. So one of the things I always like to do is get that processing outside of the computer and bring the audio in as cleanly as possible. So one of the things that I think works really well for that is the audio box from PreSonus, or one of my other favorite ones is the Lexicon Alpha. And the thing that I particularly like about the Lexicon Alpha is it does not only does it do balanced inputs, but you can also do line level balanced inputs, whereas both the PreSonus and some of the other ones, like there's a really popular one is the Focusrite. The problem with those are they all have preamplifications in them. So they all amplify the signal a little bit. And that gets... And so the issue is if you're starting with a line level, or if you're starting with a line level signal, and then it continually gets amplified, eventually it gets distorted very quickly. And so that's one of the reasons I like the lexicon. What kind of audio are you bringing into this interface?
I'm just hooking up budget speakers, so I need to keep this on a reasonable price. But like I said, on the internet, there are suggestions all over the dang place, anywhere from $10 to $200.
So let me ask you this: so you're not trying to bring audio in; you're just trying to hook up speakers to your computer. That's all you're doing.
I want to be able to listen to your show without hearing snap, crackle, pop, hiss, and then clear, and then let the channel out, and then the audio back in, and just total garbage.
Okay, and the built-in audio and the built-in audio card, that's not doing that for you, huh?
Oh, it works. Like I said, it works like it's 5.1 surround sound and built-in audio. It works great when it works, and then it just goes from you haven't moved anything or done anything. It just cuts out. It goes nothing but hiss, crackle, pop, then cleans up, then left go out, then right tail out, and I'm not describing the mess. It's just bad.
Huh.
Just bad.
And what distro is this happening with? This is Ubuntu?
This is on Ubuntu 16.10-ish.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
And I rolled it down to it's the motherboard, but I can't send it back because I've had it for too long before it decided to rear its ugly head of, the audio is horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess here's what I would do, James. I give you a couple of ideas. The first thing to do is I'd try falling back to an LTS and see if that doesn't resolve the issue. There's oftentimes in those in-between distros, you just have weird problems that come up, and that's just a function of it being weird. The second thing that you might consider trying is looking to see that specific motherboard if you Google it and see if there's other people that are reporting the same problem. I'll be honest with you, James, and I've spent a lot of time installing Linux on a lot of different motherboards. I've never seen an internal audio card that crackles and pops or anything like that. Usually it's the USB ones, the outboard ones that have any of those kinds of issues, and I have a whole list of fixes for those things, including a problem that bit me right here on the show that I was actually just complaining about right before we got on the air. But any of those things can be done. But yeah, I guess that's my best suggestion to you, James, is try the LTS, see if that works. Also, the other thing you can do is if you could send an email to live@asknoahshow.com, give me the model number of that motherboard, and I'll look into it a little further for you and see if we've come across that before. And if I ever do come across a motherboard that snaps and crackles, I'll make sure to report back on it. Dale is calling. Hey, Dale. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi. How's it going?
Hey, Dale. How can we help?
I had a question about NFS redundancy. It's a service I'm looking into. It's part of the Red Hat 6 high availability package.
Okay.
And basically what I want to do is I want to set up a test environment where I can actually attempt to set up in a lab environment some kind of test scenario that I can say, okay, I know how to do this, I know how to configure this. Now it's time to actually go to my leadership and ask, hey, can we purchase this extra add-on? Now, I obviously want to know what I'm talking about. Now, that's why I need the test environment. So is there like a DigitalOcean thing that I could use or something? Just so maybe through Ubuntu or CentOS, Fedora.
Yeah, there absolutely is. So there's a couple different ways that I test stuff like this. The first thing is you could absolutely set up like a sandbox environment on DigitalOcean or OVH. All of them support. All of them support like a local network kind of a thing, and you can set up a little local network and pass information in between as if they were sitting on a LAN. You can definitely do that. The other thing that we do, and it depends on how big your IT department is, it depends on, if you're an IT consulting company, how much resources you have, but we actually have our own, we actually do call it the sandbox. And basically it's just a room in the building that has 4 8-foot long tables and a rack of switches and a rack of routers, and we can set up and simulate all sorts of different scenarios. And that's what we do. So if we were doing it for like a university, we'd bring it in and we'd set everything up in our sandbox. And then we have cameras in there that we can do web conferencing and stuff like that to demonstrate to clients. So that's an option. But absolutely, you could go into DigitalOcean, rent yourself 2 or 3 servers, and set up that the LAN system on DigitalOcean and do all of that. They call it private networking, I guess.
Okay. One last question, I guess. So, part of our SAN, the SAN itself, what is actually being shared from the NFS share, it rides over a fiber channel, and it shows up as just a block device in Linux, /dev SDX or what have you. Now, from what I understand, that one block device would be connected to two separate hosts. What kind of catches me off is that sounds like plugging one flash drive into two machines. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yes, but yes, sorry, I know exactly where you're going with this. That is true if it was actually one device, but it's not. The problem is when you start, and we actually dealt with this with the client just today, when you start getting into the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, anything above that terabytes worth of storage, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to enclose all of that into one server. And then it is twice as complicated when you start running into these businesses that you can't take their file server down to upgrade the storage, and it has to stay up and running. And then you start dealing with, well, we want redundancy because we don't ever want it to go down. So now, where you started with maybe every 8 drives or 16 drives or 32 drives in a box, you really want, now we're talking about 16 or 32 or 64 because we want, twice as many to set up ZFS RAID and all that. And so once you start getting into, I have, the reality is I have 190 some drives, pulling from an example from today, that we have to set up onto these boxes. There's no way to enclose that in one box. So you put it on a SAN. But the SAN itself is capable of saying to itself, okay, this computer says it wants to write to this block device. I'm going to go ahead and store it on on this available storage drive, which is in this server and that server, and then it kind of coordinates it, so to speak, almost like directs the data, if you will. And so there's a couple of things when you're setting that up that you want to be really careful with. First of all, you don't want to put your SAN on the same subnet as the rest of your production network, oftentimes, because you're going to get broadcast packets, and you don't want every printer and Amazon Alexa that powers up to be monkeying around with that. So we always separate that off. SAN network is usually a 10 gig network that is specifically dedicated for that storage network, and it's VLANed off, or a lot of times it's a completely separate physical network. And then you have an interface that ties into your admin network, so to speak.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me.
Cool. Thanks for the call. We appreciate having you. Again, phone's 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. So right before we went on the air, I was having a very deep discussion with some of the people that work for the show that help out with this show, and I can't quite shake this. And I the thing is, I wasn't going to talk about this on the air for a couple of reasons. One is it kind of pulls the black curtain back and spoils the magic. And the other thing is it just kind of feels like there's this cloud hanging over my head. But I think if I don't talk about it, I think if I don't address it head on, it's going to just going to hang over my head the whole show. Anyone that has been around me for the last few months has probably been frustrated with my nonstop mission to expand this show. And, officially we go off the air at 7 p.m. And that's what 7 p.m. Central. And that's what time KEQQ Radio, our radio station, takes us off the air, goes on to whatever next program is. But the stream is somewhat flexible. There is no hard time that at least that I've been told anyway, that I have to kill the stream and return it to reruns at JB. And so last week we got off the air. And which, by the way, I was told the Mumble Room is live. So if you guys want to get on the air for Mumble, just ping me in IRC, and it's Pound Jupiter Broadcasting IRC.geekshed.net. Ping me in there, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you guys in the Mumble Room. And people in the studio, you're gonna have to turn them on when they come here. So when I call on them, but so I was having this conversation, and we started to talk about the show and what improvements we can make to the show. And last week when I got off the air, I went back in the Mumble Room just to say thank you to the people that contributed to the conversation. We actually had somebody answer a question, which was really great. And that chat and that feedback went on for 2 full hours after the show. And it was so interesting to me. It was such straightforward, honest feedback that I left the JB Live stream up after the show, just because it was, it was an interesting conversation. We actually saved that. And if there is interest in listening to that as kind of like a a close look at the Ask Noah show or something like that, if that's something that anyone's interested in, then, ping me, reach out to me, let me know. And Chris and I had talked about maybe releasing that as a special edition episode or something like that, because I think it's really interesting. I got a very heavy dose of feedback about the show. And for those of you that went on asknoahshow.com/better, God bless you people. Because, I mean, seriously, I expected, when we set up a completely anonymous source to get some feedback, I expected to receive some of the most vile, disgusting comments I'd ever read. And instead, what I was pleasantly surprised to see was some of the most useful, carefully constructed criticism I've ever gotten. And in fact, I'm so appreciative of it, and it's worked out so well. We're just going to leave the site up. So asknoahshow.com/better. It's going to be a thing from now on. If you have a suggestion for the show, if you have an idea how to make it better, you can submit it completely anonymously. We don't even ask for your name. Some of you were kind enough to in your message, say, here's my name and here's my email if you want to follow up. And I will be following up with every single one of you that did that. But we certainly don't ask for it because I don't care who you are. I just want honest feedback. And sometimes it's easier to be honest when you don't have to tie your name to it. But here's what I took away from all of the conversations that I've been having over the last week. And it's been pretty much nonstop. From the feedback that you guys sent in, everyone wants more of the show in some form. And it splinters from there. Some people say they want to do more than the 1 hour itself. Some people say, well, maybe you should do a blog surrounding the show. I've had people say, be more active on Reddit and Telegram, spend more time in the IRC. There are some people that say I should be spending more time making the mobile experience all that it can be because of the platform that we're using and the hosting capabilities. And that's how most people listen to the show. And so I spent all week and most of today, except for some of the things I had to do at work, looking at some of the ways that we can expand this show. And in one of life's little ironies, as I was working through this yesterday and today, the guide that I was using to set up this server for one of the things I wanted to do for this show was written by a quote unquote, and here's my air fingers quotes, was written by a Linux guy. And I later found out the reason the stupid guide wasn't working was because his Linux machine wasn't a Linux machine. It's a Mac. And he was running a VM. And there were some slight differences from the way that you have to set it up on the VM as you just tweak it a little bit. It wasn't hard. It wasn't challenging. It just, if you don't know, then, and he had no way of knowing that it wouldn't work on Linux because he doesn't actually use it. Then the guide was off just a little bit. And it took me 2 days to figure out what the problem was. And we did eventually get it working. And I'm going to tell you how you can take advantage of some of this stuff towards the end of the show. But this brings me to a fundamental point that seems to keep coming back and back and back in different ways to me. And it's, pay very, very, very close attention to the personal habits of the people that you take tech advice from. If they are sitting on a Mac, if they are sitting on a Windows desktop, just know that they could not figure out how to get their own work done on Linux. And so it is literally the blind leading the blind for them to show you how to get something that you want to get done on Linux. Just know that. And it's the same the other way around. Ain't no one calling this show asking for advice on the latest iPhone. I can tell you that right now. I wouldn't be able to answer most questions on iPhones because I don't use one regularly. The difference between me and somebody else is that I'm not going to lie to you about it. I don't come on the show and pretend to be an iPhone user. I've carried an iPhone once in my pocket as a form of a bet to do something for an episode on the show. In fact, to that point, one of the things that I was going to do to enhance the show was I'm working on trying to make the mobile playback more featureful. And during that, there was a feature that we were looking at, some functionality that we were looking at. And as far as I can tell, it only works on iOS. And I don't know for sure because I don't have an iPhone to test it on. I can't do like an A/B thing. But what I do know for sure is I'm not bending over backwards to provide a service that you can only get on a device that I wouldn't personally buy myself. I'm going to give you advice that's consistent with what I would do. And so I guess the other side of that is I have a strong belief that if I tell you to do something on this program, you should be able to do it on Linux. And I'm going to make sure that everybody that wants to can listen to this program on Linux right out of the box without having to check anything, install anything, violate any of their principles. And I had people that said, can we get an OGG feed of the show? Went to the powers that be, said, is this a possibility? And was told, nope, the platform that we run on does not support having doesn't support OGG. We can't do that. And so I took my own money. I rented my own server. I set the thing up to generate this feed. I gave it out to the people that asked. and I hand encode those files and put them on there every single week. So if you're one of the few people that are downloading the OGG thing, that's I'm doing that for you because I know that's important to you, and I want you to be able to listen to the show without violating your principles. Now, we don't advertise that because I don't have the skills or the time to build a metric system, and so I'd prefer that you download the show from the Ask Noah Show dashboard. But the point is, I'll bend over backwards to help those that want to use Linux. I will bend over backwards if your worldview is to support free and open source standards. And if there's something I can do, even if it's a lot of work for me, I'm willing to do that. And at the moment, I don't make any money off of doing this show. And I'm not whining about that. I'm not complaining. I do it because I want to do it. I do it because I want to help people. I do it because I like Linux. But if tomorrow somebody came to me and said, no, we'll pay you $100,000 a year to do a once a month, 1 hour radio show, but the only stipulation is you got to come over to our studios. You got to do it on a Windows or a Mac-based thing that we have set up for you. We're going to give you a MacBook, and you have to use that. I'd turn that gig down so fast it would make head rolls. Because, and I said this on day one of this program, it is baked. I believe it so strongly, it's baked into the opening of every single episode we've ever done. I am not a broadcaster. I am not a business owner. I am not a system administrator. I am a Linux community member. And I'm a Linux user that happens to run a small business, that happens to be an IT administrator, and I happen to do a little radio show about how I make a lot more money than a lot of other people without compromising my principles. This entire studio, from day one, has run Linux. And I've been hearing for years, well, Linux isn't ready for media production. You can't do that on Linux. Well, I'm doing it on Linux. It's worked out pretty well for me so far. And I'd say we have one of the best sounding shows on the internet. But and then there's going to be somebody out there that's saying, well, but no, I saw that interview where you talked about some of the equipment you used, and I Googled the prices, and that equipment's really expensive. That's why it sounds so good. Come back to earth, man. The first few months of the show, I did the first few months of the show on a $250 Mackie mixer with a used secondhand phone system that was so beat to crap and wouldn't work properly that I had to wire up a Raspberry Pi just to use the GPIO contact closers to hang up and answer the phones. This show doesn't sound drastically better today than it did on episode 1. We just have more flexibility today to bring more guests on the air simultaneously, the ability for me to do shows remotely. I can do a perfectly high-quality show completely software-based on Linux if I wanted to. It just doesn't have the flexibility that some of this more expensive equipment does. That's why I use it. It has nothing to do with, well, if you use Windows, no. And you know another thing too, just because I'm this far into this anyway. This whole Linux as a tool, not a religion, is such a cop out. It's the biggest joke in the Linux world, and that logic does not apply like anywhere else in life, except we apply it to our computers for some reason. Nobody goes into a restaurant and says, "Well, I hate the food here, but it's a tool. I just need nutrients, so I'll eat there, even because personal preference that doesn't come into play here." And and like if you take your house for example, if tomorrow somebody made houses and the electrical panels were all locked shut, the air conditioning and heating controls, they were all locked up, and only the builder could modify those things. And every piece of furniture that you wanted to put into your house had to be like approved by the home builder for permission before you were able to purchase it. And you weren't allowed to change the layout or the interior of the home. Nobody would buy that house. And yet people buy iPhones where the only apps that are in the App Store are authorized by Apple, and people still buy MacBooks where you can't easily swap out the operating system or change, various components within the operating system. You're just locked in. But if you point that out, if you say, hey, you know what? All computers have issues. So instead of paying $5,000 for that new iMac Pro, or eggshell walking around Windows 10 so it doesn't crash or reboot on you, why don't you hire a Linux consulting company for a fraction of that cost? And we will show you how you can have production-ready Linux systems that are fully supported by us. And if you ever run into a problem, no worries, boss. We got you covered because, hey, this is what we do for a living. Everyone here uses Linux as a function of their employment contract. They have to be running some form of Linux. If you say any of that, well, know it, you're treating Linux as a religion. You know what? I give up. You're right. Linux is a religion, and I'm the freaking Pope. 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. Let's get this thing back on the road. Jeez, I drug this show off the rails so fast. Let's go to the Mumble Room. Hey, guys, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Oh, hey there.
How's it going?
Hey, I heard, let's see here. What was it? Was it
Hello.
Dar? Were you the first one to ping me?
Yeah.
Hey, what's up?
So I think when you were, I think very interesting when you were talking about philosophy and picking the advice from, but also when making your decisions. And often disappointments with Linux comes with exactly not picking based on philosophical reasons as well.
Sure.
So when I pick my distro, I look at a distro that aims towards the same goals in the future. And even if it's not quite there, I know that they're not going to disappoint me because that's the direction.
Right.
And oftentimes people just get what's fancy right now, but not what's going going towards what they want, and then they get disappointed that it didn't quite work.
Sure.
And just right now in IRC, we were having a conversation that essentially it boils down to talking about how to use the finance system, or a software to handle your finances, essentially, right? And QuickBooks was the example, and I said, look, there's other alternatives, and the person then goes to say that I could just pay for the software that just works instead of
but it doesn't.
paying for the changes.
Here's the thing, though, man. Again, this is a cop out. This is a fallacy that does not exist. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. QuickBooks does not just work. Everyone says that. What they mean by that is QuickBooks works, and the things that don't work at QuickBooks, I know how to mitigate. So that at the end of the day, it just works. So the reality is, System 76, even though they don't advertise it, has had one of the best finance softwares out there, and they have had it for years. And we switched from QuickBooks to I don't want to talk about it because I don't think they officially support it anymore, or like they're actively selling it. But if that ever changes, System 76, please reach out to me and I'll be the biggest advocate for it ever. But we switched to it, and I should get my accountant in here, who, by the way, doesn't run Linux, doesn't care about Linux, couldn't care less about Linux. She just runs an accounting firm. Like, she doesn't care. And she has told me numerous times how much easier it is to run Beansbooks than it was in QuickBooks, how much faster it is to get the reports, how much easier it is to get data in and out of it. Everything is, by, to quote the guy in the chat room, in order of magnitude easier. And do you know why nobody knows about it? Do you know why nobody uses it? Because nobody even wants to have the conversation. Everyone wants to say, well, QuickBooks is the thing. Did you know that the government literally makes tools for auditors to come in when they audit your business to go through QuickBooks? Like, they can just upload your QuickBooks file, and they have like special tools that can grep through that.
So now you pay for QuickBooks twice through your taxpayer money, and when you buy it.
And you're also helping the government find ways that you can pay them more money. You're making their job easy. Like, it drives me so nuts. And I'll be the first to admit, my feathers are a little ruffled about this because I blew a day and a half trying to solve something from some poser who doesn't use Linux and then wants to come here and tell me how to do my job. It's super frustrating. But the thing is, part of it is none of us are vocal about it. None of us call people out and say, that guy should not be talking about that thing because he's not actually using that thing. He's not eating his dog food. We don't really want to hear what that guy has to say. There's very little, I guess, emphasis put on people who are actually in the trenches, who really know what they're talking about, who do this stuff day in, day out. And that, as an outsider, that is really frustrating when you start looking at it and going, wait a minute, why am I listening to this guy? He doesn't even know what he's talking about. And so it was an unintended rant. I really didn't intend to take it quite that far. I was just going to make a comment about, we were having a conversation about that earlier. And I was talking about Chris about even earlier in the day about this too. And, he's on the same page with me. It's just very frustrating to people that they what it is, I think, for a lot of us that are in this space, I think what we're frustrated by is the people that look at Linux and people who want to consume Linux media as a rather untouched portion of the media. Like, there's plenty of people making videos about Windows. There's plenty of people making videos about Mac. Plenty of people making videos about Linux servers. Nobody is really touching Linux on the desktop. At least not a whole lot of people. And so I think there's a lot of people that come in. They're in the media space, so they don't actually really care. They talk about anything as long as you write them a paycheck. And they go, well, there's a space that's not really touched. I'm going to go ahead and just report on that. And then they spread FUD, and they spread misinformation, and they report incorrect things, and they publish incorrect guides that don't work because they've never actually used the thing they're talking about. And then those are the people, for whatever reason, that seem to rise to the top of media prominence. And then as somebody who lives, eats, and breathes this stuff, like, the guy called in about an audio interface. That's the first call of the hour, right? We had an audio interface that screwed up in this very studio like a month ago, maybe. And or maybe it was a couple weeks ago anyway. And one of the things that happened is, when that happened, was I looked into it and I found out there was a sampling rate issue. And I found out where the config file was, and that it tries to guess what the sampling rate is, and you can statically set that. And as soon as I did that, boom, no more audio problems, no more octave going up, no more octave going down. And people run into that all the time. And Skype has this issue where it tries to mandatorily set the sample rate when you first open it up. And so if you're using two different programs, programs that want to call a different sample rate, and the sample rate is set by something other than what the audio interface actually is, and Skype opens up, all of a sudden the octave jumps up a couple octaves, and it sounds ridiculous. But the reason I know that, and the reason I know how to fix that, is because it bit my show. I lost a whole episode over it. And again, not whining about it, not complaining about it, just saying I use the stuff, and so I know where the problem is. Again, 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Was there another caller here? I thought I saw somebody else. If there was somebody else that was here, I glanced up, and then I went back to mumble and came back, and he was gone. If there's, was it maybe Ben? If there's somebody out there, if you call back in, we'll definitely take your call. Was that it, Daredevil, or do you have more?
No, that was it, and it's one of the things that I personally find frustrating. And I actually there's times that I build proprietary software. When people ask me that it's proprietary, they just pay more for that, because I prefer to receive less and have freedom than to do that. But some customers, they will have one very specific occasion that's not really the possibility that they have. And they want security through obscurity. They have to pay for it. And I think it's just interesting to see that too often times people are willing to put the money when it's about getting a piece of software that they can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And they're not okay with waiting. Like, if you want to change in any piece of proprietary software, what is the iteration cycle? How many months are you waiting for that feature? And how many months are you waiting for it to be patched? And you still don't see that it's more valuable to pay to change that free software piece you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it is the decision is just made by people that don't know any better. I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to that make the decisions for the businesses are not they're not technical people. A lot of them are they're executive level people. Anyway, JJ to the 4884. Hey man, how's it going?
How's it going, Noah?
Excellent.
So my question for tonight is with regards to Mocha and your experience with it, and is it a viable alternative to having to rewire your house in order to and having that high expense for the time being? I'm looking at it for like a smart TV or something, nothing like another computer or anything like that.
Okay, help me with this. I know very, very little about Mocha. Tell me a little bit about what it is.
So basically what it is, Mocha is sending, instead of having Ethernet, you're using the coax to send internet over, internet over coax.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know a ton about it. I've heard other people talking about it. I've never played with it myself. However, you have to think about this. The other end, if you look at how most of us get internet through our houses through cable modems. And so what they're doing is they're taking a CMTS, encoding internet, sending it across a piece of coax, and then essentially demodulating it with a cable modem on the other side. So I would imagine this is no different, right?
Not sure. As far as I'm aware from what I've researched, it appears to be, I think you have to get like a filter and then two other devices where you have to like you said, plug in the coax from the end and then plug it into a actual converter from the coax to Ethernet, and I want to see it as an option instead of having to like rewire everything.
Sure. I was just doing some research here right on the air because that's of course the hallmark of a good radio host. So yeah, it's basically Mocha is apparently just a standard for Ethernet over coax, which is actually different than the Mocha project I've heard of, because the Mocha project I heard of software thing on GitHub. But yeah, is there? Here's the thing. I don't have a problem with it if that's something you think would be beneficial, but I have to ask, like, RG6 is expensive compared to Cat5 or Cat6. Why in the world would you want to send it over coax rather than pulling some Cat5 or Cat6?
I would say since we already have coax in our house, due to saying we don't use it for cable television, so I'm just thinking, and plus, it is just an option that I'm looking at. I'm still open to other ideas. Yeah,
I'll give you a couple of ideas. So first of all, one thing is coax, unless it was put in at the time that the house was built, is usually not stapled inside of the walls. They usually fish it, and so numerous times I've gone to a coax in a house and tugged on it a little bit. You can tell it's not stapled to the wall, and you can just electrical tape the bejesus out of the thing, onto a Cat 5 cable, and then you can just go down in the basement and pull on the coax, and you can pull where coax once was, Cat 5 will then be. The other thing you can do if you don't have that option, let's say it is stapled into the wall, if you got an open basement, you can go where you can cut a little section out of the wall and drill down into the basement and feed coax up. If your basement is finished, you can go the other way. You can snake up into the wall, into the attic, and then what you can do is either you can have like a switch up there that sometimes gets kind of hot, so it's not always preferred. But the other thing you can do is then once you're at the attic, you can go find a single wall that goes all the way down to the basement in like a laundry room and an electrical room, and you can just unzip the just a small little
that's a good idea.
Maybe 4-inch piece of the
my eyes out for everything.
Yeah, you can unzip like maybe a 4-inch piece of the sheetrock from the top to the bottom, or you don't even necessarily need to do that. You could actually just cut out like maybe a 4-inch by 4-inch square, and then that gives you enough room to feel the wire, pull it down, go to the bottom of the wall, cut out another 4-inch square, and then just tape around that and patch it back up. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on what you want to do. The other side to this is, do you know how many homes we don't worry about doing wired Ethernet in anymore? I mean, a lot of the stuff we just do wireless. I mean, if you have AC, for most home use, it's fine. I probably wouldn't do that inside of an office building. I certainly wouldn't do that inside of like a corporate network, anything like that. I still don't really trust wireless. And every time somebody comes out and says, yep, see, we've gone a whole couple years without some big Wi-Fi bug. Then a big Wi-Fi bug comes out, and then we realize it wasn't secure. So there's some ideas for you. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-6624. The email live at asknoahshow.com. And we are in the Mumble Room, apparently, live. Or it's, what is it, mumble.jupiterbroadcasting.org? mumble.jupitercolony.com, one of those two. Yeah, okay. So anyway, anyway, that's my rant on people in the Linux community. Pay attention to the tech broadcasters that you listen to. Pay attention to their personal habits. Pay attention to the hardware they're using on a daily basis, because that will give you a pretty good indication on what kind of authority they are on Linux. ZDNet headline: Intel says stop firmware patching until further notice. Intel is recommending that people stop pushing its current firmware updates designed to address the Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities, and hold tight for further information until later this week. We recommend that OEMs, cloud service providers, system manufacturers, software vendors, and end users stop deployment on current versions, as they may introduce higher than expected reboots and other unpredictable system behavior. Intel Data Center Group General Manager Naveen Shenoy said in a security note. Shenoy said Intel has released updated firmware with its partners for testing at the weekend, and asked them to test harder. We ask that the industry partners focus on testing early versions of the updated solution so that we can accelerate its release, Shenoy wrote. When Intel admitted that the crashes were also hitting Kaby Lake and Skylake processors, its advice was to keep deploying the patches. And then we got another article, too, that talks about Red Hat. We're going to get to that in just a second, because Red Hat has started to catch some of the brunt of some of this. But I think where we are at is, so let's hit a couple of things right off the bat. All of you people that said when we first announced this, well, it's not such a big deal. Clearly, it's a big deal, and continues to be a big deal, and is getting bigger, because now we find out that we can't even really actually patch this stuff yet, and we're still working, trying to figure out how to do that. Additionally, Linus had some choice words to say. We're going to get to that too in a second. Again, from datacenterknowledge.com, headline: Red Hat, we didn't pull the CPU microcode update to pass the bug. The open source software vendor says it pulled the update meant to address some of the recent discovered CPU design flaws because it was faulty, not because it wanted to shift responsibility to hardware vendors. Red Hat got in a bit of a PR snafu this week when it pulled from its distribution a CPU microcode update meant to address the Spectre vulnerability variant 2. The Register, the news tech site that broke the story about Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities in processors earlier in the month characterized the move as Red Hat washing its hands of the responsibility to provide customers with firmware patches to address the vulnerability by instructing them to get firmware updates from the hardware vendors instead. Now, let me stop right there before I continue on with the article. Let's think about this for a second. Red Hat's entire business model, from top to bottom, is providing support for enterprises that use Linux. So why would Red Hat intentionally try to pass the buck off on the one thing that they need to make money? If it wasn't for the ability for them to pass off take patches from things like Intel and make sure that people are paying them for Red Hat Enterprise Supported Edition and getting those patches in, where is Red Hat's business model? How would they make any money? If everyone could get the patches right from Intel, and that's a thing that just continued to happen. If that was a theme that just continued, that everyone could just get the information, get the patches, get the code somewhere else, well then where is the necessity for Red Hat? How would they be able to justify charging the amount of money that they charge for a supported distribution? So logically, it doesn't even make any sense. The article continues to go on and says, it's true that Red Hat distributed microcode to address variant 2 of the Spectre vulnerability to its customers and then removed it after Intel announced that some customers were experiencing unwanted system reboots after applying the firmware update that included Spectre mitigations. But Red Hat isn't actually involved in writing the firmware updates. It passes the microcode created by chip makers to its users as a customer convenience. Translation, Red Hat didn't write an update, put the code in, and then have people update it, and then pulled it back and said, nah, boo boo, go figure it out from Intel. Intel wrote this code, sloppily, I might add, gave it to Red Hat. Red Hat sent it out to a bunch of their customers. It started destroying machines in one way, form, or another. And then they pulled it back out and said, listen, you know what? If you're interested in it, Intel is currently working on it, and they started it, and then they stopped it with the AMD thing, and then they started it back up, and now they've stopped it again. You know what? Just go to Intel, get it from them. You want to apply it? Go ahead and apply it. Seems like a highly logical move to me, and one that anyone that's paying for enterprise support would appreciate. So I don't really understand how it's a PR kerfluffle for Red Hat. It seems kind of ridiculous to me. 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Dar, did you have something to add about the Wi-Fi thing? Good.
So essentially, what most people are forgetting is that when it comes down to these Intel patches, Red Hat and the other companies are the ones that have the customer base and have the direct reporting of their customers of the problems. Intel can actually only develop solutions as they grow towards the actual fix. So when you're developing something and you test it in your lab, it works. They release it. Intel is confident that it works. Only then the specific scenarios that Red Hat experiences actually can fix or tell Intel, hey, here's a more comprehensive report of what you've done, and it doesn't quite work yet. You need to fix it.
Okay.
Otherwise, how would Intel know? Intel doesn't talk with customers. You buy the hardware and you go home, and if it doesn't work, you buy AMD next time.
Well, and here's the other thing too. To a large degree, a lot of customers don't want to talk to Intel unless they directly or have to. So, in some ways, Red Hat passing them off is to move people and say, here is the appropriate place to get this information. Here's the appropriate place to get these patches. You're probably not usually familiar with this. I don't know. It seems very frustrating. We'll have a link in the show notes to you from Linus from the mailing list, the Linux kernel mailing list. And what's frustrating about that is when Linus goes on the record to try to point some things out and just call people out, then he is chastised for it. And he's kind of this bombastic figure that everyone kind of likes to hate for some reason, and it's kind of frustrating. But we at the Ask Noah Show, we're going to continue to follow this. We're going to continue to follow Spectre, continue to follow Meltdown. Obviously, we are going to release a short video with an explanation for more on an executive level. The problem is the stuff keeps changing. Every time we get partway through making a video, and all of a sudden some of that stuff is irrelevant. So right now, there is no go-to answer. We don't even really have an answer. We know there's a problem, but I can't really tell you, go ahead and update, because depending on the hour and the time of the week, there may be an update available, there may not be. and we don't even know for sure what the future of all of this is going to be. And I still want to find out an answer. And I know it's difficult and nobody really knows this, but I would really like to know, when are we going to have an answer on when this problem isn't just going to be mitigated? When is it going to actually be fixed? What generation of Intel processor is going to come out and is going to have this completely fixed? Like, this isn't even going to be a problem anymore. And I don't have an answer to that. And the best answer I have gotten from somebody who works in the industry, the best they were able to tell me is it will be another 2 or 3 generations of Intel processors before this problem is actually fixed. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Did you guys know that we're doing a distro elimination challenge? That's right, guys. And this is a cool experience. And I just got to see the snippets of the website that we are putting together for the distro elimination challenge, and it is cool. I think this is going to be a really great resource for the Linux community, and you guys are helping build it by going to asknoahshow.com/elimination every single week to vote on your favorite Linux distro. Now, when I say your favorite Linux distro, it doesn't have to be the one that you would choose to use. It just has to be the one that you would use over the second one. So, for example, I am right now I have Ubuntu on my laptop, but I run Fedora at home. Now, if I could only pick one distribution, it would be Fedora. But if my choices were between Ubuntu and, let's say, who can I pick on? OpenSUSE. I would pick Ubuntu because I would rather use Ubuntu than OpenSUSE. And so, of those two, my vote would be for Ubuntu. But if I had my choice of Fedora or Ubuntu, it would very much be Fedora. If my choice was between Fedora and OpenSUSE, it would very much be Fedora. So once we have all of the winners from round 1 of the Linux Elimination Challenge, then round 2, we'll be taking all those winners and pitting them together. So you'll have a chance, assuming your favorite distro didn't get washed out, we'll have a chance to vote on all of them. Now, last week, we pitted Arch and Debian against each other. This week, I'm happy to announce the winner is Debian. Unsurprisingly, 50.2% of the votes went to Debian, whereas 49.8% of the votes went to Arch. So it won by a very, very slim margin, but it did win. And so, unfortunately, well, fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Debian continues on. Arch goes by the wayside. So this week, I don't have it open. That's terrible. I got to open up my Linux elimination program here. Okay, here we go. So this week we are voting on Gentoo and Elementary OS. Now, Gentoo is kind of the geek's geek of Linux. If you want to learn about Linux, you install a lot of people install Arch, a lot of people install Slackware, or people install Gentoo, because you really will learn the in and outs of Linux if you're using Gentoo. And of course, Elementary OS, good friends of the show. We've talked to Daniel many times. Basically what Elementary OS is one of the most polished Linux distros out there based on Ubuntu. The idea being, he has rounded corners. So when you go and open up Elementary OS, it's all of the little things that most people don't think of. Those guys think of it and they fix it. And so they built basically the Linux distro for the common folk, the people that just want to, for all of you people that were sitting back 15 minutes ago when I was on my little tirade, for all of you that were sitting back going, I just want something that works. I just want to install something and have something that works. Elementary OS guys, that's what those guys are doing. And if you want more choice, if you want more flexibility, if you think you have a better idea of how to get a perfect Linux experience, then check out Gentoo. I'm curious, Mumble guys, since you guys are still here and you guys seem to be rather active today, what's your thoughts on Gentoo versus Elementary OS?
LOL at Gentoo.
Okay.
This is simple. Gentoo is your own system. You build it, you design it, it's perfect fit. It's going to what is the word? The man that makes your suits?
Tailor.
No, he's talking about
your tailor.
bespoke.
He's going to a tailor.
Oh, okay.
It's going to a tailor, right? You have it perfectly made for you.
Yeah,
and that's great.
Matches.
So Elementary it is when you buy that outfit, just in a store. You pick your size and you dress it. If it looks great, you continue using it, and if it doesn't, you have to go to another store.
Yeah, it makes sense. I could see that. I've used them both. I've always, the thing is, like, and this is one of those things where I'm not even going to talk about it because I don't have any real plans to do it. So, but Gentoo or Elementary OS, again, you can vote asknoah.com / asknoahshow.com/elimination. This week, on Thursday, I had a chance to sit down with my good friend Chris Curran from the Podcast Engineering School. And what Chris does is he teaches people how to podcast. So if you've ever wanted to host a podcast, if you've ever wanted to start a podcast, or maybe you're a business and you don't actually have time to do a podcast, and so you want somebody to take care of all the nitty-gritty details, like you just want to sit down and talk into a microphone and then have that content produced, sent out to all the people, edited, and have it sound really, really good. Chris Curran is the guy. He's the guy that does that, and his podcast is teaching other people how to do that. And Chris Curran, he reached out to me. He said, "You know what? I heard you have a broadcast grade quality studio. I heard that you do a show about Linux and that the entire studio runs Linux, and I think that's really interesting. And would you come on the show and share that with me?" And so we sit down and we talk to Chris Curran and explained exactly how we're making this show here in the studio. And so if you're interested in the type of equipment we use, how we're doing it, our process, all of that stuff, check out that episode of the Podcast Engineering School. And of course, we'll have a link for you in the show notes. And again, I think I actually kind of made a reference to that earlier. It is not the only way to make a podcast on Linux. You can do it for a far less money than I've done it for in here. But the problem is, I have a full-time business that I have to run, and that means that anytime I'm not in the studio, like tonight, I'm not sitting in front of the board tonight, I can't just reach over. In fact, it caused a little bit of a kerfluffle at the beginning of the episode. But I can't just reach over and turn the mobile room on. I got to count on somebody else to do that, and if it's not there, I have no way of knowing because I can't see it. And part of that is I need to be able to remotely control a lot of that stuff. So if because I do have remote control over that computer, I could remote in and turn on that particular mixer channel and stuff like that. That's all possible to do with the new system. And it's just you can't do that on an analog board. And so we explained all of that and went through the details. If that's something that's interesting to you, we'll make sure to have a link for you in the show notes about that. Also, if you guys, did you know that this show is available as a downloadable podcast? If you want to subscribe to the feed or download the latest episode, visit podcast.asknoahshow.com. And over the next couple of weeks, we are going to continue to put an emphasis on mobile playback. We pulled statistics from where you guys are listening to the show, and it's not on Windows, and it's not on Mac OS, and unfortunately, it's not on Linux. It is on Android and iOS. And as long as the feature set works on both Android and iOS, I'm more than happy to spend a little bit of extra time making that a possibility. I also know that people want more resources for the show. So I have heard people, like one of the things that I'm sure has frustrated, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to scream at their speakers, "Yes, that's why that has happened to me." I'll be on a call. I'm talking to somebody and I say, "No problem, and I'll have a link for you in the show notes." And then no link ever appears, and people are they say, "Well, yeah, you said you're going to have a link. I let you in a dirty little secret. I'm not the one that actually publishes the episode. That's handled by our editor. So I have no way of going back into the show notes and saying, 'Oh, I forgot to add this thing. Let me add it now.' If it's not in the notes by the time we go on to the air, or if I don't remember to put it in within like 10 minutes afterwards, it just isn't getting put in the show notes that week. And I can follow up the week after, but that's not a great system. And so one of the things that our hosting provider lets us do is they have this little applet, and I can click on a button. And anytime I click on that button, the page that I'm on automatically gets inserted. It won't go into the show notes, but it will go into your podcast player if you're watching, or if you're listening to the show on a mobile app like Pocket Casts. And so when you're listening to the app, you can swipe right, and it will have a list of all of these links that I collect through the week. And of course, I'm going to try to copy as many of those as I can into the actual show notes that are published on the site. But for those that don't make it in there, I can 100% guarantee you, because I do have an ability to go back and add those at any point in time. I can add those to it. I could click on one right now and add it back to episode 1 if I wanted to. I can do that. And so that's pretty cool. And so we're going to start taking advantage of that. we're also looking at different ways that we can give you more content outside of the show. And so we're concentrating on 3 different things right now, and I'm interested to hear your vote. So if you have a strong preference on this, if you'd like to see more short video content that's tailored towards YouTube, or if you'd be interested in having a blog post written about every one of the episodes that has additional details about the guests that were on the show, more links to them, biography, stuff like that, we could do that. Or the other thing we're considering is a newsletter, where at the end of the show, we send out a newsletter that details everything we talked about in the show, has some of the calls, has little clips transcribed in text form, so you can kind of get a brief overview of what we talked about on the show, what happened on the show as a reference point. And, there's another show that I listen to. The guy does the same thing. That's kind of where I got the idea. I flat out stole it is really what happened. But he does that. And what I do is I just set up Thunderbird to automatically have a folder for all of those, for that newsletter that comes out. And I don't read it every single time, but there more than once I've been like, oh yeah, I heard that on the show. I wonder where that, and I'll go back to my folder and say, well, I know it was about this time, and I'll search for a keyword. Oh yeah, there it is. And then I can find the clips and stuff that he uses for the show, or the links and articles and stuff that he references. So if any of that is useful to you guys, again, let me know, asknoahshow.com/better. Mumble Room, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate you guys being here.
No problem.
You're welcome.
Phones were a little light today. We just had a couple of calls. So it's kind of nice. The problem is anytime I'm not in the studio, it's difficult for me to get the Mumble Room up and going. And so, but thankfully I've got nice, good, dedicated people that can take care of that for me. So I was actually, hey Citizen, are you here?
Hey,
how's it going?
Going pretty good.
Yeah. So you're the reason that Mumble is here tonight, because you pinged me in IRC, and then you're like, oh man, and I'm like, okay, I'll send a message. We'll figure out a way.
Well, you made it. You delivered on your promise, and I think that's pretty cool.
Now, like I said, when it comes to Linux, I bend over backwards. What can I say? So you guys are all on Linux, right?
Yes.
Of course. What do you expect, Noah?
Exactly. Hey guys,
To be fair, I don't even call it Linux. I just say that I'm on Debian, because that allows Debian to change the kernel if need be, but not necessarily.
Oh, screw the alternate kernels. Linux is the best.
Oh my gosh, here we go. This is why we don't always have the Mumble Room, because we divulge into this kind of stuff. Next, they're going to be saying I didn't say GNU/Linux.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I don't.
Nobody
here
cares about that.
I just think. Look, I don't go that far. I think actually one of the biggest issues we still face today is that we are still picking the expression Linux distribution. That actually screws developers. If a developer knows that he's building for Ubuntu and thinks of developing for Ubuntu and develops for Ubuntu, and then Ubuntu users use their software and it works, they will have a great experience. But once they think, oh, that's a Linux distro, I'm going to go to Arch and this is going to work, and it doesn't work, and they feel basically frustrated, right?
So
that's the sad part.
As somebody who actually is a Linux distribution developer, as Noah may know if he can recognize my voice, I am very much involved in Linux distribution development. One of the things I think that a lot of people miss when they mention the term Linux distro or Linux distribution is that fundamentally that's all about making certain choices about how the thing is going to be put together. A distribution, by its very nature, is opinionated. Even the ones that a lot of people consider not opinionated, like Gen 2. It has a very strong opinion of how you assemble the system. Even when you set the use flags and things like that, that's an opinion on how you configure and build.
Sure.
So it just goes a little bit further with the binary distributions, such as Fedora, OpenSUSE, and Debian, and its other, you can keep going down that line. The thing is, when they make those choices and put together that system, they're effectively declaring a platform. And in some cases, this involves even binary incompatibilities. For example, Debian has a thing where they, in the early days when they didn't really know how they're supposed to do stuff yet, everybody was kind of learning it, they messed up the PCRE library. So now it has the wrong ABI signature from every other distribution. And they never bothered to fix it. So now we're stuck like this until somebody decides that, yes, this is a thing that we should actually fix.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said that for a long time. I've said, hey, you know what? Every single distribution is really its own operating system. We need to make that distinction. Hey guys, did you like I said, this is available as a downloadable podcast, podcast.asknoahshow.com. While you're on the Ask Noah dashboard, help us improve the show. Let us know if you have an idea of how to improve it. asknoahshow.com/better. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. A huge thanks to Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener, and Rakai, our video editor. Big thanks to Voxtelsis for providing our new phone system so I don't have to use a Raspberry Pi with contact closures. We'll hand you off to harm reduction coming up next on Logos Radio, KEQQ 88.3 LPFM, Grand Forks.